You know what I love? I love it when people demean others for their hobbies and what they enjoy doing. Sarcasm. It just really shows the level of maturity that people have to put down others. So, enter Bill Maher, a comedian of sorts who runs the show Real Time with Bill Maher, who a few days ago decided to bring up some sort of controversy he had over social media over the death of Stan Lee. Well, this should be fun. But before we get to the actual video, I think it's important to talk about the context of the actual editorial that Bill wrote a few months ago. Don't worry, it's about only 3 paragraphs long.
Hi, I'm V. I'm reading these off for Common. Why? Because he asked me to.
No.
The guy who created Spider-Man and the Hulk has died, and America is in mourning. Deep mourning for a man who inspired millions to, I don't know, watch a movie, I guess. Someone on Reddit posted, "I'm so incredibly grateful I lived in a world that included Stan Lee. Personally, I'm grateful I lived in a world that included oxygen and trees, but to each his own." Holy, that's morbid.
When I think about that Reddit post, Bill forgets that little thing called context, that there was a sentence before this expressing about the guy was loving the tribute that was made in Stan Lee's death. Linking to it is a bit confusing since the guy was being emotional about the death of a man and you got Bill here taking him out of context for a joke.
Now, I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then when I was a kid and when I was out of Hardy Boys. But the assumption everyone had back then, both the adults and the kids, was that comics were for kids. And when you grew up, you moved onto big boy books without the pictures. I mean, the Karma Sutra exists. Okay, Bill. Okay. And you know, all those fucking books for doctors to know things, Grey's Anatomy, you know, those are evidently for children. Right, I getcha. I'm the dumb one here.
Times change, cultures change, you know, there was an old saying, the only difference between men and boys are the size of their toys. Hell, even by today's standards, we've got comics that are adults only, and for good reason since there's some graphic content in them, such as The Walking Dead. I guess that's only for kids too now, huh?
Ben!
Do you have any bullets left? This has only got 1 left in it.
I'm out.
Shit.
I'm going.
Good. Get back up there. Now.
Can't let you do this.
Fucking go. Back, you sons of bitches. Yeah. Oh, fuck. Kenny, please.
What happened?
Kenny made sure that Ben didn't feel any more pain than he had to.
You saw them die?
Nobody was getting out of there.
But then, 20 years or so ago, something happened. Adults decided that they didn't want to give up kids' stuff, and they pretended comic books were actually sophisticated literature.
Comic book writing is not always top shelf or deep, but then again, neither are books. Or haven't you read young adult fiction, pretty much any romance novel, or 50 Shades of Grey? Hello? But there are some incredible storylines with some of the best writing I've seen in them. In comics, some of them are stretching over months or even years and across multiple titles. Bit of a generalization when later you go on to say you didn't read comics when you were young and show that you don't have experience with the medium, but that would be spoilers at the moment.
And because America has over 4,500 colleges, which means we need more professors than we have smart people, some dumb people got to be professors by writing with these titles like Otherness and Heterodoxy in the Silver Surfer. What?
First off, a nitpick, but theses? I think you mean thesis. I know it's small misspelling, but whatever. Secondly, you're basically judging a paper based on the title. Maybe I should discuss the paper, then maybe I could understand where you're coming from. But you're just basically dissing it for the title. I mean, that's pretty much like judging a book on its cover. I mean, it's not like we have fields of psychology like the Truman Show delusion based off the Truman Show movie, therefore using pop culture to make a subject more easily accessible. Oh.
And now, when adults are forced to do grown-up things like buy auto insurance, they call it adulting, and act like it's some giant struggle. I'm not saying we've necessarily gotten stupider. The average Joe is smarter in a lot of ways than he was in, say, the 1940s, when A Big Night Out was a Three Stooges short and a Common Miranda musical. The problem is, we're using our smart on stupid stuff. I don't think it's a huge stretch to suggest that Donald Trump could only get elected in a country that, thanks to comic books, are important.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be a dumb statement to make if you didn't find some way to shove Donald Trump into the mix. Now, I bring this up mainly to show that he'll be doubling down on this in his actual video, which we'll be getting into right now, which is called New Rule. And to cover my bases, I'm aware that it's a segment used to satirize topics, events, or whatever. However, from what I understand it, Bill here goes on it with a liberal bias regardless of the topics. And as we'll see, that's kind of an issue.
And finally, to every person on social media who's asked me since November, Bill, what do you have to say about Stan Lee? And every paparazzi outside a restaurant who's still shouting at me, Bill, what about the Stan Lee thing? Okay, your day has come. Tonight's editorial is about Stan Lee, who, if you missed it, died in November. And a few days later, I posted a blog that was in no way an attack on Mr. Lee, but took the occasion of his death to express my dismay at people who think comic books are literature and superhero movies are great cinema, and who in general are stuck in an everlasting childhood.
And you're surprised people got pissed off? You're generalizing a huge amount of people for simply enjoying a medium, not to mention you're writing off Stan Lee's death to support this agenda. And in fact, when you really think about it, that's the reason why people probably took issue with what you're saying. Think about it. He's calling people children for liking Stan Lee's stuff. I may not agree with it, obviously, but it's an opinion that he can have. However, what isn't groovy is the circumstance surrounding this whole thing. Also, I don't know why you think you know anything about the medium to say whether it is or isn't great literature. You yourself admitted to not actually reading any comics. You see, back in November after this whole thing went off, Maher gave an interesting quote. So let's read it, shall we?
Yeah, I don't know very much about Stan Lee, and it certainly wasn't a swipe at Stan Lee. I am agnostic on Stan Lee. No, agnostic is not being used correctly here. Agnostic is your stance on religion, not on a person. Agnostic means that you're not sure on what is real or isn't real within religion. It means that you're not an atheist, and it means that you're not a theist. It means you're undecided. I don't read comic books. I didn't even read them when I was a child. What I was saying is, a culture that thinks that comic books and comic book movies are profound meditations on human condition is dumb f***ing culture. And for people to, get mad at what just proves my point. Huh?
Before I get to my point, wow, Bill, you have no awareness whatsoever. Literally demonize and insult everyone because you don't like Stan Lee's work and because people are overreacting. That wasn't really the issue, it was what was said in the situation around the statements. What should be taken into consideration is him saying that he hasn't ever read comics. So for him to say that comics can't have an impact on the human condition with no experience with the medium, other than possibly the movies, is dumb. Really, really dumb. In fact, it's a trope. Complaining about shows you don't watch. I wish there was a shorter name for this trope, but it's like...
You don't know yet!
Yeah, if you haven't read any comics, then why should we even listen to your old wrinkly face about the subject? Sit down, and please do not act like you're an authority of what comics can and can't do when you have no experience with them. And you know, this even goes against what you said in your initial statement. Being so inconsistent that you say this.
I have nothing against comic books. I read them now and then when I was a kid, and when I was out of Hardy Boys. But the assumption everyone had back then, both the adults and the kids, was that comics were for kids. And when you grew up, you moved onto big boy books without the pictures.
So, which is it? Do you have experience with comics, or you do not have experience with comics? I already can't take you seriously since you're flip-flopping on your experience. Not that it really matters if you do or don't have experience with comics. You're basing your interpretation on information that may or may not be over 50 years old. Do you really think comics are the same as they were back then? Back during the Silver Age of comics? If anything, this is a childish mindset, especially since this is something that you're going back over 2 months later, doubling down on your points and even bragging that people unfollowed you because of these points.
Bragging that you're all about the Marvel Universe is like boasting that your mother still pins your mittens to your sleeves.
You know, I'd love to hear that full conversation, or if anyone actually talked about that on their own. Okay, I know this is gonna sound mean, but gotta love the bobbleheads who are agreeing with this and laughing like they're rejects from that 70s show Circle gag.
You can, if you want, like the exact same things you liked when you were 10.
Whoa, the exact same things? Bill, thanks for confirming that you're ignorant on the subject. Comics have evolved for the past half-century, you know. Comics talk about very serious topics, including real-world issues. And heck, you're mainly focusing on superhero comics. What about comics that aren't of the superhero genre? This is way too much of a generalization and really paints you as the old man you really are. Bill is just calling literally everyone who's a massive fan of something that he personally doesn't like just childish, which, honestly, why the hell should anyone take what he's saying as credible at this point when he's demonizing the opposing view with such such a broad brush without any real basis other than his personal opinion is beyond me.
But if you do, you need to grow up. That was the point of my blog. I'm not glad Stan Lee is dead. I'm sad you're alive.
Okay then, gonna start mercilessly making fun of you in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, laugh it up, buddy. Go with the over-the-top laugh.
And by the way, if someone says you're being childish and you react by throwing a tantrum, you're not Iron Man. You're Irony Man.
Ah, that was horrible! Why would you put that pun there? In any case, you mean what you're doing right now? I mean, you're reacting to people getting on your case for generalizing people for a hobby. A hobby by abusing your platform to mock them. I mean, who's the real child here? If anything, I see a gray-haired, spoiled brat wearing a suit and having a laugh track behind him.
Well, let me tell you, people were pissed about this post. I wasn't even aware that I had ruffled so many capes.
You use the death of a remarkable man as the chance to say that the works he was creating weren't great literature and then deride fans of those works and insult them. Yeah, you're the mature one here, Bill.
Until I saw that 40,000 Twitter followers unfollowed me like that. To which I say, good riddance, follow Yogi Bear.
Gotta love how the guy treats his audience. This reminds me of the likes of Velisify and Rice Scum. You don't like what I have to say? Then unsubscribe. Yeah, just treat that audience that made you what you are like garbage. That's smart. Actually, no, it's actually worse than Rice Scum and Velisify. What Bill is doing is actually making any of his audience who don't agree with him look like the villains in all this. In fact, the paid for laugh track is where it's going to make those people who disagree with him being seen as ridiculous and stupid and fun to point and laugh at.
Director Kevin Smith accused me of taking a shot when no shots are fucking necessary. Except again, my shot wasn't at Stan Lee. It was at, you know, grown men who still dress like kids.
First off, that doesn't prove Kevin Smith wrong. You are taking unnecessary shots at the fans of comics. Secondly, to imply that all comic book fans are immature slackers while showing Kevin Smith in his casual wear is disingenuous at best. Kevin Smith wears that because it's comfortable. He can dress however he wants, especially considering his affinity in pop culture and the fact that he happens to be a well-known celebrity. Not everyone has to wear suits in order to be treated as an adult, or deserve to, considering how you're going on about this topic.
One comment said that Stan Lee has inspired children to believe in something bigger than them, and then added, "Congrats, you're a cunt," on the same level that Ann Coulter is a cunt. Boy, did you pick the wrong night to tune in.
Gotta love that cherry-picked comment that may or may not have been actually said in the same tweet or wherever this was said. Even if it was said, congrats, you found one example of a group of millions of people to prove your point. It's a dishonest tactic, but then again, I'm not surprised. Also, love how Ann Coulter thing wasn't even needed. I don't care for her, but this feels like an opportunity to fling dung at everyone and just make things more controversial when it's not needed.
Other people tweeted things like, "I learned about social justice and racial tolerance by reading comic books." Okay, but now you have pubic hair. Read James Baldwin, read Toni Morrison, read Michael Eric Dyson. Even a book as dumb as the Bible gets this.
Of course, there'll be some religious slamming to show how woke you are.
M'lady.
Also, I'd like to point out the person, if they exist, that they learned about social justice and racial tolerance from comics. Who's to say they didn't go on to read literature about it? Who's to say that comics weren't just acting as the gateway for them to get interested in the topics? But for you to knock how someone learns about something as important as these things is immature of you. Which would you rather have, Bill? People who learn about important ideas from comic books, or full-fledged adults who deny the existence of them? Again, we know nothing about the person who made up this quote, and Bill is just making an assumption. Heck, we don't even know how old the individual is either. For all we know, it could just be a teenager.
When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things, including my X-Men bedsheets.
Funny how making fun of people can be viewed as childish, huh?
Can we stop pretending that the writing in comic books is so good?
Yeah, and you're such an expert. Also, because we have a visual image for us to see what's going on, dialogue and building of a story with dialogue alone is totally not fine art.
Oh, please. Every superhero movie is the same thing. A person who doesn't have powers gets them, has to figure out how they work, and then has to find a glowy thing. Justice League, glowy thing. Iron Man, glowy thing. Spider-Man, glowy thing. Captain America, glowy thing. Glowy thing, glowy thing, glowy thing.
Movie, not comic book. False equivalence, and not even a good one. Dark Knight Trilogy. Trilogy. Dark Knight Trilogy, no glowy thing. Original Spider-Man Trilogy, no glowy thing. Deadpool, no glowy thing. Also, Iron Man didn't get powers, he made a suit. Ant-Man, no glowy thing. Captain America's story had nothing to do with him getting used to the power. In fact, the story he had was more focused on war efforts and how to prove himself. Thor was a god.
I'm God.
A god who had to come to terms with losing his powers. But hey, I guess when you're trying to insult works of cinema and pop culture, I guess details are fine to sweat off and ignore.
And again, there's nothing wrong with a man writing comic books. There is something wrong with adults thinking they're profound. The folks at Stan's company, Team Stan, wrote an open letter to me and said, "You have a right to your opinion that comics are childish and unsophisticated." Many said the same about Dickens, Steinbeck, Melville, and even Shakespeare. No, they didn't.
Actually, yeah, they did. Let's start with Shakespeare. Taken from Britannica.com, John Dryden's essay in 1668 claimed that Shakespeare lacked decorum since Shakespeare had written from an ignorant age. Ben Jonson, an English critic and Shakespeare's contemporary, faulted the playwright for having a mediocre command of classical languages. Samuel Johnson found that Shakespeare's plots were full of implausible plots and had a fondness for puns. I could go on with Shakespeare, but I'll provide a link down below for this.
No one ever said that. No one ever said King Lear or Moby Dick was childish and unsophisticated.
Henry F. Corley, October 25th, 1851. Yeah, that was one of the first reviews for Moby Dick. You had people who said similar things about Moby Dick when it first came out. You know, Bill, really goes to show that you don't know what you're talking about. Really makes me question who's the incompetent one who can't be bothered to actually know about the people that's being talked about.
If you ever read a book without pictures, you'd know that. Team Shakespeare should write you an open letter.
And maybe you should do a 5-minute Google search. Or is that too much for you?
Yes, Howard the Duck, Hamlet, same diff. To thine own self be true, meet Hulk smash. Comics are for kids.
Oh yes, let me get my little cousin's Deadpool kills the entire Marvel Universe, or Marvel Zombies. Iron Man, the story of a multi-millionaire warsmith who gets kidnapped by terrorists, brutally beaten various times, enslaved, and was sold off to people because human trafficking. Ghost Rider makes a deal with the devil to lose his humanity and survive and do the bidding for him. Star-Lord, his mother dies of cancer and then gets abducted by aliens to do their bidding for them. Yeah, those comics are definitely for kids.
That's why they sell them next to the Pokemon cards and not on the aisle with the condoms and the lube. I'm sorry, but if you're an adult playing with superhero dolls, I'm sorry, I mean collectible action figures.
What? I think we took a long turn to Albuquerque. What the hell are you going on about? There are dedicated bookstores to comics. They're called comic shops. Besides, again, what does this have to do with anything? I get this was a joke, but really goes to show that Bill has no idea of the landscape of pop culture. This is such a stupid argument. Here, let me show you. Hey Bill, smoking pot's for hippies in the 70s, yet you still like to hit it up. Grow up, you hippie! You see how stupid this kind of argument can be used for? That also doesn't mention that the actual value of these action figures, in some cases they can be considered an investment because some of these can go for quite a bit of money.
Why not go all the way and drive to work on a big wheel? Grown-ups these days, they cling so desperately to their childhood that when they do attempt to act their age, they have a special word for it now. Adulting.
Now, this has been a word for at least 2 decades. Thank you, Merriam-Webster.
It's clobbering time.
Marriages have been destroyed because the husbands, adult men, can't stop playing video games.
Okay, question, why are we suddenly talking about video games? Wasn't this about comics? Are you now saying that video games are for kids now? Stay on topic, old man!
When your wife wants to have sex and you can't come to bed because you're about to level up in Fortnite, don't be surprised when your relationship does this.
Funny that the guy who's not married feels like he's the relationship guru. Also, again, what does this have to do with comics? This isn't emblematic of the issues with games. This is something that can be an issue with anything in Access. So again, for someone who likes to proclaim about being an adult and being mature, this certainly made me roll my eyes at the irony. Oh, I'm sorry, irony man. You know, this is the same rhetoric that people had things with like rock and roll, movies, and etc. If you hate comic books so much, then why not keep it to yourself? But to go on a rant twice about them just makes you look petty, and the fact that you felt that you had to do this, first one immediately following the death of one of the biggest icons in the comic book industry, Stan Lee, only makes you appear more pathetic. If you feel so strongly about comic books, so be it, but to attack millions of people of all ages and maturity levels because you don't happen to like is asinine. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'm Mangakamen, and remember to examine your fandom. Thanks for watching.